Caleb refueled and circled back to the service area parking lot, finding Kinsley daydreaming at the water bar. He tossed the car keys onto the table, casually sat down, and asked, "Back in our hometown, you used to be a servant, and now you've returned as a master. Slapping their faces must feel pretty satisfying, huh?" Kinsley sneered, shifting her gaze elsewhere. Caleb played with the car keys and continued, "If you divorce me, lose your status as my daughter-in-law, and go back, you won't be treated the same way." Unable to endure it any longer, Kinsley retorted, "What's wrong with your daughter-in-law from your family? If the relatives back home find out that my husband, a wealthy second generation, only earns $6,000 a month, what do you think they'll think of me?" Caleb, with his neck stiffened, countered, "Kinsley, you can't say things like that. The villa we live in, and the Porsche we drive, were bought by my family, right? Without my $6,000 a month salary, could you, an out-of-town worker, enjoy all this? That villa is over $30 million, and the car is over $2 million. Do you have any idea, Kinsley? Do you think an annual salary of a few $100,000 is impressive here? You and us are not on the same level at all." Kinsley replied, "Do you still have the nerve to say that the villa and the car have anything to do with me? Oh no, they do. Your salary can't support the villa and the car. You just used my money to fill up the tank when you went to refuel." Feeling humiliated, Caleb got a bit angry. "I've never hidden the fact that I earn $6,000 a month from you. Everyone knows it. You're not after me, you're after my family's money. Whenever my parents give you tangible benefits, you wouldn't think of divorcing me." Pierced in a sore spot, Kinsley shook her head helplessly, held back the tears in her eyes, and said, "Deal with this month's credit card bill yourself. I won't give you money for your one-night stand and hotel expenses." Caleb defended himself, "I only hooked up once. It was just because I had too much to drink. Also, don't forget, it was your card, so it affects your credit score." Amused, Kinsley laughed, Fine, I'll pay. Caleb, let's divorce. I don't want to endure you for another second." Caleb asked, "Do you have to be like this? Have you forgotten how good you were to me back then? Aren't you enjoying living in a villa and driving a luxury car now? In a few more years, when my parents get old, I'll naturally settle down, and then we can manage the family business together. Isn't that good?" Kinsley retorted, "Enough with your empty promises." Looking forlorn, Caleb stared at Kinsley for a while and said, "Okay, we can divorce. Kinsley, with my $6,000 a month salary and your $600,000 a year income, after being married for more than 3 years, the marital property has to be divided equally, you know." Kinsley felt thunderstruck. After hitting the road again, Kinsley didn't utter a word. During the journey of over 2 hours, she pondered on what to do in the future. She roughly calculated that in the 3 years of marriage, she had saved around $1.5 million through salary, bonuses, investments, and side businesses. If they divorced, she would have to give Caleb $750,000. However, she couldn't take a single penny from Caleb. Because Caleb's meager salary couldn't even support himself, and the villa and car were bought by his parents and registered under their names. In the end, the village girl who struggled her way through education, finally marrying into a wealthy family, found herself raising a playboy for 3 years. She would end up with a divorced status and lose a hard-earned sum of money. Under the rumbling sound of the engine, Kinsley closed her eyes and angrily clenched her teeth. Upon reaching home, Kinsley silently entered the study. Caleb knocked on the door to reconcile, but Kinsley ignored him. Losing patience, he left in frustration. Kinsley didn't want to foot the bill for Caleb's extravagant lifestyle anymore. She changed the credit card password and stared at the ceiling in despair. If she insisted on a divorce, she would have to roll away with her suitcase, losing several $100,000 in savings. If she stayed married, she would have to endure this life. She had laid out her terms, but Caleb would only become more unrestrained, and she felt powerless. Morally speaking, her only hope afterward might be for her in-laws to age quickly or die soon. If Caleb inherited the family fortune, she, as his legal wife, could bask in the glory and secure the identity of a wealthy daughter-in-law. Thinking about her in-laws, Kinsley suddenly considered talking to them. When she and Caleb got married, his parents were strongly opposed, even sneaking out the marriage registration. Since they never fully accepted her as their daughter-in-law, they might strongly support her if she chose to divorce. With their wealth, they probably wouldn't care about the few $100,000 their son would get through the divorce. As long as her in-laws intervened, getting a divorce and safeguarding her savings shouldn't be too difficult. The next day, Kinsley went to her in-laws, pleading for their intervention. To her astonishment, their attitude was surprisingly consistent. They wouldn't interfere. Frustrated and losing her composure, Kinsley questioned loudly, "Do you know what kind of person Caleb is? You arranged a leisurely job for him, and he only earns $6,000 a month. Don't you know about his spending habits? I've been supporting him for 3 years. He eats my food, uses my things, and even uses my card for casual encounters. If I divorce, he still wants a share of my savings. Is he even a human? As his parents, shouldn't you do something about it? Or is it that you, with such a big family and business, care so little about those few $100,000? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" The mother-in-law smiled casually, "Kinsley, if we could control him, he wouldn't have married you in the first place." Kinsley was stunned, memories of the scenes of her coercing Caleb into marriage flashing in her mind. Technically, she didn't force him, she just tempted Caleb into marrying her. She served him, cleaned up his messes, played the role of his sister, his bedmate, and even his mother. She suggested marriage when Caleb had a fallout with his family and ran away. At that time, she was confident that with her wit and skills, she could control this wealthy but naive young man from a well-off family. After all, Caleb was his in-laws' only son, and she could use her abilities to smoothly navigate the shortcut into their family, achieve social upward mobility, and completely change her destiny. Little did she know that everything was just her own wishful thinking. The result of her manipulation was her own entanglement. Feeling defeated, Kinsley walked back from her in-laws' place. In the vast mansion, she was alone. She surveyed the luxuriously decorated surroundings, recalling the cramped city village she had rented, the female dormitories in the urban area, and the apartment buildings she had lived in. A chill ran down her spine. Even with her current income, it was unlikely she would return to that kind of life after a divorce. However, the thought of giving away half of her hard-earned money to Caleb, a fatal blow, was unbearable. She couldn't expect to earn as much money every year, and while climbing the career ladder as Caleb's daughter-in-law, she had reached the pinnacle. The blend of the momentary beauty and the mirage of a promising future was intoxicating. What do people fear the most when standing at the peak of life? They fear looking down at every inch of the descent that follows. After their heated argument that day, Caleb didn't come back for several days in a row. Kinsley couldn't be bothered with him, continuing to work every day as usual. She consulted several lawyer friends, but none of them could provide a quick solution for her to leave with the money she earned after marriage. In the midst of her hesitation, Kinsley suddenly realized that Caleb hadn't been home for nearly 10 days. He was still her husband, and she couldn't completely ignore him. However, calls went unanswered, numerous WeChat messages received no reply, and inquiries with mutual acquaintances yielded no information. 2 days later, Kinsley received a delivery, an exquisitely crafted box containing a luxury handbag and a set of cosmetics, accompanied by a note saying, "Please accept these, my dear wife." Feeling inexplicably uneasy, Kinsley wondered where Caleb got the money. That night, after receiving the gift, she finally received a call from Caleb, who sounded triumphant. "How is it? Did you receive the gift? Do you like it? You always thought I was a useless person, just because my parents didn't give me a chance. A dragon gives birth to a dragon, a phoenix gives birth to a phoenix. I've been watching my parents do business since I was a child. Did you really think I don't understand anything, just playing around?" Suppressing her anxious emotions, Kinsley spoke softly, "Where did you get the money? Come back soon." Caleb, arrogantly, responded, "You don't need to worry. Just remember, as long as I'm willing, I have the ability. These days, I've figured it out. No matter what you married me for, you've been good to me, better than anyone else. If you want a divorce, it's probably because you think I can't make your life better, and everything depends on my parents. Don't worry, that won't happen anymore. I'll prove to you that I can give you the life you want." Before Kinsley could speak again, the call ended with a beep. Subsequently, Kinsley received various items sent back by Caleb. In a daze, she even started to believe that Caleb might turn over a new leaf. She began contemplating the possibility of continuing the marriage. For the past 2 years, she had been avoiding pregnancy due to her focus on her career. Perhaps this was also the reason her in-laws were wary of her. If Caleb came back, and they had a child, would the situation improve? After all, Caleb was their only son. Reality quickly delivered a harsh blow to Kinsley. A month later, Caleb finally returned, bearing visible injuries. When he saw Kinsley, he resembled a small creature seeking refuge. Sensing trouble, Kinsley asked coldly, "Aren't you doing business outside?" Nervously swallowing, Caleb stammered, "Wife, you have to help me." Closing her eyes, Kinsley asked, "What happened again?" Avoiding eye contact, Caleb said, "There's an investment project, very promising. Some friends and I wanted to do it together. It was profitable initially, otherwise, I wouldn't have money to buy you things. But then, I don't know what happened, suddenly it went downhill. I thought it was just a temporary difficulty, but with no money in hand, I borrowed more to invest. Now the business has failed, and they're asking me to repay the debt." Sighing and holding her head, Kinsley, after a long calm, wearily said, "So you still haven't figured out until now. Your so-called friends set a trap from the beginning, waiting for you, the fool, to jump in, didn't they?" Caleb huddled on the sofa, shrinking in helplessness. "But I did make money at the beginning. I just didn't want to be looked down upon by you. I wanted to prove myself, to give you the life you desire. I did it all for you." Kinsley's heart was bleeding. "How much debt do you owe?" Caleb timidly glanced at her. "Well, not too much, just 1 million. Feeling like her world was collapsing, Kinsley choked back tears and waved her hand. "Go home and ask your parents. You are their only son, they won't stand by and watch you get into trouble. If they raised you to be a failure, they should take responsibility for it." Caleb rubbed his hands nervously. "I already tried. My parents don't care. You don't know how heartless they are. They said making me earn a fixed salary is the best arrangement for me. Doing business was for us, to improve our lives. So, this debt should be shared by us as a couple. They told me to find you. Come on, Kinsley, good sister, good wife, you can't just watch me fall like this. They are ruthless." Leaning back on the sofa, staring at the dazzling crystal chandelier on the ceiling, Kinsley fell into a daze. She remembered the first day she moved into this mansion, and she was amazed by this luxurious and dazzling chandelier. Caleb claimed it was imported from France, very expensive. Kinsley loved how every corner of the hall was illuminated by this chandelier, making even the fatigue after a hard day's work shine. But at the end of that year, after hiring someone to clean and maintain the chandelier, she rarely lit it again. Because, after the collapse of the wealthy facade, this chandelier, like the mansion and luxury car she enjoyed, had long become her burden and expense. In fact, she should have divorced Caleb a long time ago. The day she realized she couldn't take the shortcut. The day she discovered she had to support this useless second-generation rich kid. The day she found out he was recklessly spending on her credit card. And now, this idiot had directly accumulated a massive debt. She could have cut her losses in time, but she was absurdly searching for a turnaround, watching the corroding hole grow bigger and bigger. When she could have left with just her bag, she dragged it until she had to give away half of her savings. Because she couldn't bear to part with that half of her savings, she dragged it until she had to repay $1 million in debt. If she continued to drag this on, she dared not think about it because, with Caleb, anything was possible. Even his own parents saw through him early on, had no hope for him, and what was she still hoping for? Kinsley consulted with lawyers but couldn't find an effective way to extricate herself. Caleb had gifted her expensive items early in their marriage, indicating her knowledge and enjoyment of the benefits. Negotiations with her in-laws proved fruitless. They insisted on staying out of it, fully aware that the burden of the debt fell on her. She considered dragging things out until Caleb was pushed to the brink, forcing her in-laws to intervene. However, one day, she felt the ominous presence of unknown individuals following her. Fearing for her safety, feeling harassed and exhausted, Kinsley finally broke down. Reluctantly, she gave up the struggle, agreeing to divorce Caleb on the condition that she would help repay the debt and manage to retain the rest of her money. On the day she received the divorce papers, Caleb looked like a defeated dog, watching Kinsley with despondent eyes. She knew his apparent sorrow wasn't because he loved her deeply, he was just upset about losing a safety net. After all, his parents never indulged him. Kinsley didn't want to exchange more words with him. She hurried back to the mansion to pack her belongings, fearing that any delay would result in further losses. As she left with her suitcase, Kinsley felt a tightening sensation in her chest, struggling to breathe. It wasn't until she sat on the roadside and cried that the accumulated pain of many years was finally released. She was a young woman with education, capability, and an annual income of 600,000 yuan, outstanding by any standard. Yet, she had fallen so far. She couldn't pinpoint where she went wrong. Growing up in poverty, with a father addicted to gambling and a mother working as a sex worker, she faced ridicule and scorn while living with her grandmother. The desire to change her fate was deeply rooted in her heart. She excelled in her studies, turning malicious intent into motivation, and eventually earned a place in high school and then university, becoming the most educated person in her hometown. The moment everyone acknowledged her, she experienced a sense of pleasure she had never felt before. She became addicted to that feeling. After graduating, she stayed in the city, worked hard, climbed the corporate ladder, and met a quality local man. She believed she had earned the right to a beautiful life. However, when her boyfriend took her home to meet his family, she felt the same scorn she had experienced in her childhood. His family rejected her based on her background. Despite her efforts, she ended up back at square one. If she could have accepted reality and reconciled with herself at that time, choosing a modest life alone or finding a partner of similar standing, even slightly lower, she might have avoided the path that led her to this point. But she didn't. She became both humble and arrogant, convinced that life was either advancing or retreating. She sought external forces to heal her internal wounds. Later, she met Caleb and saw it as a chance to soar to new heights. She went to great lengths to marry him, transforming into the second young mistress of Caleb's family. The initial shock she witnessed in the eyes of relatives and her ex-boyfriend was like a magical medicine, curing the chronic disease of spiritual poverty. Even when she later realized the magic medicine was a potent drug, causing her to overextend herself, she still couldn't bear to let go. Now, consider everything I'm going through as punishment I've received from destiny, Kinsley thought. I'll never be a desperate dog again, never be led by the smell of a meaty bone, and never expect to nibble on someone else's flesh. Ambition swelled, burst into fragments, she was tired, and she no longer wanted to damage her dental health.